Our meeting is being live streamed, so please, if you could just pull your microphone towards you so that all the discussions and deliberations today are clearly heard from those who are watching from afar. And to those who are watching our live stream this morning, welcome to our meeting this morning too. Please turn off your mobiles, and we will be taking a break so that you can clear any of your urgent messages. I'd like to take a break perhaps around about 11 o'clock, and hopefully we'll be finished. Otherwise, we will be taking our lunch break at 1 o'clock. So I'd like to think that we might be able to get through our full program this morning, and then when we do break for lunch, there'll be no necessity to come back. So welcome to you all this morning, and we do have an opening karakia. I know I've got some welcomes to do, but I'll have our opening karakia, please, and that's by Mr. Berryman Kemp. Thank you. Morena. Thank you, Mr. Berryman Kemp. And of course, we do have members of the public who are here this morning, and our media personnel, staff, Felix, Morena. So welcome to you all as well. But it is my happy duty this morning also to welcome the students from St Mary's School, the council there, the student council. No mai haramai, welcome to you. And I think Councillor Wang, where are you? Councillor Wang, I know that you've been escorting the students around or their council chambers today, and perhaps you might like to elaborate a little bit more on them here, sharing our morning with us for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena koutou. Yes, I'd just like to welcome and introduce the Student Council of St Mary's School here in Rotorua. These are an amazing bunch of young kids who I think is just so inspiring that they're already engaged in student council and giving back to their community and their school. So what we did today, Councillor Tapsell and I took them alongside Rick to visit some departments in the council building, regulatory, customer service, and we also got to meet a few city safeguardians, and hope that would probably inspire them a little bit more, and just to show them how council operates and what council does to keep our communities moving smoothly and keep our communities safe. But thank you so much for letting me introduce them, and I hope they enjoy this little session of our council meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wang. And thank you to the students for coming along and showing an interest in our council. Everything that we do here, whether it's or in the morning when you get up and you turn on the lights, or when you flush the loo, or when you go play in this park, or when you go in the sports fields, drive around the city, council is actually responsible in one way, shape or form for all of those, seeing that those are all operating and working efficiently for the well-being of the city. So it's just lovely to have you with us this morning. So thank you very much. So apologies, please. I'll call for any apologies this morning. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, Madam Chair. Her Worship the Mayor, she's on council business at the Air New Zealand Mayoral Forum.
Thank you. Thank you. That's our worship, yes. Oh, yes, Ms. Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to put in apologies for an early departure around 11:45, or whatever break is possible to get in that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll have a mover in a second to please that I apologise and notice of early departure. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you. Thank you, No, Councillor Yates it was. Thank you, Councillor Yates. So all those in favour, apologies been accepted. Also say aye, thank you. Aye, kia ora, thank you. Declarations of interest. Carl. Urgent items not... Oh, sorry. Declarations of interest. Sorry, Mr Berriman Kemp.
Yes, apologies, Madam Chair. Just one thing, just to outline to this committee, later in today's agenda, there's the discussion item on the Pururu North Reserve. That relates to Ngāti Kia Ngāti Tuara. I'm a Ngāti Kia Ngāti Tuara iwi member, but I haven't been involved in that particular work stream.
Thank you. So noted. Thank you. Yes, Ms Marr.
I would like to raise the same declaration of interest, the same as Mr Berriman Kemp, that I'm an iwi member of Ngāti Kia Ngāti Tuara, but have no involvement in this.
Thank you very much. That's so noted. Thank you. Any urgent items not on the agenda? Yes, Mr Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. About a year ago, the Mayor, she's not here, so this will have to be a question to go to the Mayor. A year ago, the Mayor indicated she'd be reviewing both governance structures and appointments after 1 year. And about a week or so ago, the Chief Executive foreshadowed the possibility of new management structures. So quite urgently, please, can we have an update soon on both reviews, because they're aspects of administrative policy. Thank you.
Yes, I haven't had any more feedback on that, but thank you very much. That might be something that certainly the Mayor might be giving that some thought at present. I think we'll just so noted.
Leave it on the table. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. No further items of urgent business.
One other issue. I understand from Deputy Mayor that the AGM for the airport's been moved from Friday to the 18th of December. Can you confirm that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I can confirm that, Madam Chair. So just a late email last night from the airport CE to say that the AGM's been deferred due to delay in receiving audit papers. So now it'll be on the 18th of December, and members will be advised accordingly.
And I suspect that's within the legal time frame to give notice that there's been a... Thank you. Nothing tomorrow. Right, thank you for that. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you. Thank you. Confirmation of our minutes. The Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting, minutes of the 8th of October 2020. Are there any changes, amendments? Yes, Mr Berriman Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Item 3 under the minutes declarations of interest. There's a declaration regarding the review of Class 4 Gaming Board venue policy. I don't actually recall making that declaration, and I can't see what interest I have in that. So I wonder if that can be removed, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that. No further changes, amendments. Could I please have a mover and a seconder that with that amendment noted? Thank you, Mr Berriman Kemp. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. The Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting minutes of the 8th of October 2020. This was the hearing for the Prostitution Bylaw statement of proposal. So those are the minutes there. Are there any... Yes, Mrs Trumper? No, thank you. Were you moving, Mrs Trumper? Thank you. It's moved by Mrs Trumper, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. So that they are a true and correct record. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Thank you very much. Now we have our first of our staff reports, which is the Tarawera Wastewater Reticulation Scheme. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, that the report Tarawera Wastewater Reticulation Scheme be received? Thank you, Mr Trumper. Thank you, Councillor Yates. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. And Stavros is going to overview the report and give us a presentation. Morena Stavros, thank you. Oh, and Thomas, Tinakwe Thomas, Morena.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morena, Madam Chair. Morena Adukatua. I will start with this quick presentation, if I may. And I would like to briefly outline a bit of a background to the proposed Tarawera Lakes Community Wastewater Reticulation. This proposal is consistent with the Council's commitment and participation as a member of the Rotorua Lakes Water Quality Group, a strategy group that incorporates and includes the Rotorua Lakes Council, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, the Ministry for the Environment, and Tiarua Lakes. The overarching objective here is, from the perspective of Rotorua Lakes Council, is to contribute to the reduction of pollution and nutrients that enter our lakes, with a long-term objective to attain a level of what we call trophic level index for each lake, which means that the lakes maintain a sustainable level of health, in those kind of environments. That kind of objective enjoys the broad support of all the participating parties, and Council has a unique contribution to make to that in terms of the management of our wastewater services. Gradually, since the early 2000s, a number of reticulation schemes have been enacted, including Lake Okareka, Hamurama, upgrades to our treatment plant, and so on. And obviously, the primary objective is to control the fugitive wastewater related pollution that enters our lakes. We're going to come to Tarawera Lake, again, is one of our significant lakes in the district, and the Tarawera Lakes community has been active in seeking support from the strategy group and all the parties in that group to initiate and commence a wastewater reticulation scheme for the community in Tarawera. Aligned with that, an application has been made to the Freshwaters Fund, administered under the Ministry of the Environment in 2017, and we were successful to receive somewhere in the region of $6.5 million towards a contribution to that scheme. In support of that application, an initial cultural impact assessment was undertaken in 2017, which was followed later on in 2019 with a final one to inform the decisions made by this council. It's quite important also to identify that the options for the lakes, Rotorua Lakes community population and people up there are not simply to do a reticulation or do nothing. The option is that under the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's regulations, especially in the offset regulations, properties that are situated near or adjacent to the lakes, they need to control their wastewater via what we call an on-site switch effluent treatment process or offset process. The most viable alternative, of course, is that the reticulation, because the offset process requires each individual property to install an offset system, and each individual property owner to manage that offset system in perpetuity in order to meet the target fugitive nutrients that are living from that individual property. Now, the community since 2015 have been active and supportive of a reticulation scheme because in the long term, that is the most viable option to achieve the optimal results of isolating, transmitting, and treating wastewater in a way that benefits the lake's water quality. Now, with subsidies in hand of $6.5 million and a commitment by the Rotorua Lakes Council and the Regional Council to contribute respectively $750,000 each to that scheme, we've got a fixed amount of about $8 million as a contribution to that lake. The Council has considered the Tarawera reticulation scheme in its long-term plan of 2018 and has always been supportive of that. And the Council has established a current funding policy for that scheme, which basically says the gross costs of the scheme, whatever they might be eventually, minus the subsidies, result to net capital costs. And those net capital costs will be paid by each individual benefited ratepayer in the Lake Tarawera upon completion of the scheme. So in a sense, the Council borrows the money upfront, execute the scheme, and upon completion of the scheme, your policy requires ratepayers to pay a lump sum as a portion by the actual cost of the scheme. As I said, in the past, there have been in the vicinity, there have been reticulation schemes in Okareka, and that scheme was completed, I think, in 2009. In completing the scheme, spare capacity was allocated into the main pipes that lead into the city to enable future growth, including Lake Tarawera. And the council has been carrying a debt to the value of about $2.9 million ever since in its books, in its balance sheet. So with that in mind, the process today, went through the restoration plan in 2015, the two cultural impact assessments, and the final 2019 cultural impact assessment with a report to the project steering group, which identified the historical perspective of various mana whenua in the area, and especially in the early parts of the 20th century, and and how active that area was there before the eruption of Tarawera. Also, we heard from the cultural impact assessment team that the mana whenua are very supportive of the broad objectives of the scheme because it's consistent with the lake's water quality. There were some parts of the cultural impact assessment that asked the council to explore and assess the feasibility of an in-catchment wastewater treatment plant, a report back into mana whenua. That assessment was made, and later on, during in February or early 2020, we have reported back to the affected iwi, and we have identified that implementing a wastewater treatment plant in the catchment was problematic for a number of reasons. One was a lack of available land to install it. Second, there were some geotechnical and geological constraints in terms of groundwater conditions in the area. And the third thing, of course, a wastewater treatment plant would add somewhere in the region of $12 million of capital cost to the scheme, plus ongoing operations and maintenance and renewal costs for that scheme. Our recommendation as officers that that scheme of a wastewater treatment plant in catchment was unviable in the long term, and we have reached a conclusion that the best option for the Tarawera reticulation would have been a connection through to the pump station in Okareka, and from Okareka into the treatment plant. It needs to be noted that Tarawera community, once reticulated, will produce somewhere in the region of 500 cubic meters of wastewater a day, and that in the context of about 20,000 cubic meters of wastewater that our treatment plant currently receives. So it's a small portion of that available capacity, and therefore it made no sense to duplicate the treatment capacity inside the catchment from a financial perspective, let alone the practical limitations of identifying a place and backing into resource concerns and legal issues to secure the land and so on. Would have extended the ability to give effect to the scheme for a number of years, while in the meantime Lake Tarawera will continue to be polluted and impacted by nutrients. So the community, after a number of years working together and going through a whole range of list options, has consolidated and has recommended and has agreed through public meetings and through the Rotorua Lakes Community Resident Association and the agreement of council officers, a final option which basically requires the installation of low-pressure grinder pumps on each individual property, with about 450 current properties in the catchment, and those grinder pumps connected through mains through Tarawera Road all the way to Lake Okareka pump station, and from there connected into the wastewater treatment plant into the city. The scheme and the options have been well canvassed by the community, and I think we as officers are very comfortable in terms of the operational practicalities of that. An exploration was made. As you can see, that green line identified that the possibility of connecting the scheme through Plains Farm to Okareka. That became problematic for a number of reasons. There were a number of cultural limitations and sacred grounds in the area, plus obtaining agreements and legal access ways and easements through the private land and so on would have made it a lot more complicated, to enact. While putting the mains and the main trunk mains through Tarawera Road is on a road corridor that's already owned by the council, it requires no consents other than operational permits to install the pipelines. And from the operational perspective, that's the easiest way. It adds a bit more costs into the initial scheme, but in relevance to obtaining access through a private land through Plains Farm, the costs are basically balancing each other out. So that is the scheme proposal, and some preliminary cost estimates have been made for the scheme, and those schemes have been communicated to the Rotorua Lakes community back in October 2018, which identifies that once the subsidies are removed from the project, which has got a gross cost estimate at this point in time of $22.5 million, leaves a residual of $14.5 million to be distributed in two ways. The network will be distributed, the cost of the network will be distributed amongst 550 properties, which is an estimate for the potential growth for the district from 450 properties, while the cost of the grinder pumps will be allocated to each individual current property. The net cost to each individual ratepayer will be in the region of $30,000 as an estimate at this point in time. The policy requires that cost to be paid immediately upon, as a lump sum, immediately upon completion of the project. The next steps, what we suggest in our report at the moment, is that if the committee is supportive and recommends to council to be so too, then we commence a communication process with each individual ratepayer. What we propose to do as officers is to write to every one of the ratepayers in Tarawera and outline the option, the scheme, the costs, and the implementation processes. And will be required from the ratepayers in Tarawera a 75% return support for the scheme. The reason we do that is that we want to protect upfront investment in terms of investing in design and exploration work. So we have to make sure that the majority of the ratepayers are supportive of the scheme and the cost of the scheme. Once we secure that 75% support, then we will embark into detailed feasibility study and design exploration. We'll do property surveys, and we'll undertake all the physical and theoretical work and calculations that need to be done in order to pinpoint and firm the costs. We have access to relatively good cost databases at this point in time, but nevertheless, we will not know exactly the actual cost until we complete the design and ask for potential contractors to price them through binding commitments. Once we have these binding commitments, we know exactly what the costs will be. The proposal is actually to commence delivery of the project sometime in 2021 and a completion by 2024. At that point in time, a process will be enacted where under your current funding policy, the affected ratepayers will pay the allocatable lump sum to the council. And therefore, our recommendation in this report is for you to support the scheme and support the process we outline for securing and ensuring ratepayer support for that, and reconfirm or consider your current funding policy as it stands. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Stavros. Thank you. I'm going to now open it up for questions. Thank you, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thank you very much, Stavros. This is a very sophisticated presentation of all the pros and cons. Much appreciated. Huge amount of work, negotiations involved. My interest, and I strongly support in general the scheme. The key questions around the capital project funding plan, which is said to be attached. I've had difficulties with the computer, so that may have been made available to me, but I haven't been able to read it. My interest here focuses particularly on financing options that might be offered to the... My interest focus is very much on potential or possible financing options that could be offered to the residents as they make this decision whether or not they'd prefer to participate. How can they be possibly assisted with by the council operating a financing scheme would be the focus of my interest. Thank you.
So, thank you, Councillor. Just to remind Council, back in 2015 was the first LTP that the Tarawera scheme made it into. At that time of the discussion, it was around affordability, that the only way to fit the scheme into the program of work was to have the scheme paid off as a lump sum. There have been multiple discussions, I think, since that time with rural board members and the like with regards to alternative means, but because of those affordability issues, we've pursued, obviously, with the lump sum payment versus the targeted rate. I think the debate around if there are alternatives or whether you wish to explore that should probably form part of your current LTP discussions rather than in this forum, because at the moment our recommendation is obviously from an affordability perspective to do it the way that it has been proposed.
Thanks. I'll leave it to the LTP environment then, because there are possibly, given the very, very cheap money that's available at the moment, there might be ways and means of easing the burden over a period of time for the residents. But I'll leave things there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I just have one question, and I'd also like to signal that when we get to the debating stage of this, I would like to move this recommendation. Stavros, I just have a question around the point where we are going to write to all the residents and owners out at Tarawera, and given that in these schemes there always is a creep in the cost, and with all my experience of Rotoiti, Rotomā, I know that the prices do slowly go up as we firm up the details. So just, I would ask, is it possible when we send that letter out that we work alongside the Tarawera Ratepayers Association, which has a very good connection with the community and has been very engaged in this planned sewage treatment for Tarawera, that we engage with them to make sure we get a sort of an educational review of why we're doing the scheme and the benefits for the community, so that as the property owners are looking at signing that document, that they support it, that they have that information with them, rather than just a bold letter asking them to commit.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I think the answer has to be yes. We have and will continue to work with the Rotorua Lakes Residents Association for a number of years, and will continue to do so. And I think it makes perfect sense to work together in that information option. And I think it's also quite important, and I wanted to say, I emphasized again that I'm very keen and very firm in my view that we have to emphasize that the current estimates are simply the best estimates we've got, and therefore the community needs to be very clear about it, that as costs are verified and get more firmed as through the tendering process and construction process, they need to continue to be updated too. And also, it's quite important to remind the ratepayers up there, in the community, that the alternative is not status quo. The status quo is not viable, because over 43% of the properties of 450 odd properties up there cannot accommodate an OSIS system, which means that it would not be able to operate legally under the Health Act. So it's quite important to have a little bit of background and the rationale behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Tēnā kōrua, and through you, Madam Chair, actually, Councillor McPherson asked part of my question, and I do realise that this will be part of our due diligence with LTP, but it was also to look at the possibilities of early payments towards a lump sum, so that come the time when the deadline is there, whether or not we too can look at opportunities for our ratepayers out at Tarawera to look at alternatives. So that would be appreciated. Kia ora.
Thank you. Mr. Berriman-Kim?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Stavros Thomas, thank you for your report. My question is going back to the risk of the reticulation piping system over that distance and topography, I guess. And certainly I know that we're always concerned about the impact of earthquakes and things like this, but I guess I reflect on Taupo District Council's wastewater discharge into Lake Taupo last year, where a wastewater pipe that was well within its time frame failed. And one of the issues was that where the pipe was laid was not only the lowest point of a downhill gradient for the majority of the town, but also was right next to the lake. And of course, this proposed system goes past 4 lakes and ultimately terminates just before a 5th. So my question is regarding the risk of... my question is, what are the mitigations that are going to be put into place to mitigate the risk of pipe failure given the proximity to lakes and given the topography?
Thank you, Eugene. I think that these are important design questions to be asked. The intention for us as part of this scheme is actually to do a risk assessment for the corridor that the pipes will be laid. Obviously some areas of the corridor will be a lot more sensitive than other areas. And I will remind also elected members and everyone around this room is that when we commenced the installation of the reticulation system for Lake Rotoma and Rotoiti, some 35 kilometers of main trunk pipelines, we worked very closely with the cultural impact team down there, who had identified sort of sensitive areas, and we have implemented and will continue to implement additional risk mitigation design options like double sleeving, concrete embedment, flexibility of joints, and so on. I think it's quite important to note here that no engineering works can be designed to the level that will be never failure. However, we have to design to the level where if a failure occurs, the consequences are minimized. And therefore, as I said earlier, and I think that's pivotal to what I was mentioning, that I give cost estimates at this point in time on the basis of my best of our ability. However, until you go through this detailed risk-based design, we will not know the exact cost. But certainly, we will identify sensitive areas and make sure that all the available risk mitigation options are applied to the design process.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley, then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stavros, thank you for your report this morning. If this sewage reticulation scheme goes ahead, is it your intention, not on the same trench, but in the same capital works, that you reticulate water supply as well?
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. I think the reticulation of potable water supply to a few communities that do not have reticulated water is an objective we have. I would caution, though, that subject to the decisions you elected members have to make in terms of your long-term priorities, and the LTP would consider that. I certainly caution against because I've heard it many times where we're saying that while digging a trench to put a sewage pipe, we wanted to put a water pipe, And of course, as you know, that is not really an advisable process to follow. But certainly, we are already exploring the option of a water reticulation of Tarawera, and we will consider as part of your long-term plan for that.
Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question in the paper. The total cost is based on all of the
ratepayers at Tarawera, not just those with houses, because there's a line in the paper that says that there is a risk the network capacity may be abortive if the future, that's the unbuilt section, houses don't join. So is there a risk to this proposal?
Yes, Councillor Kaifong. Obviously, consistent with when the Lake of Kareka reticulation scheme was constructed in 2009, there was an additional spare capacity built into the system. And actually, there's good and proper engineering practice going to design systems for the next 30, 50, 100 years. You cannot retrofit that, on an annual basis. So you make some assumptions of what the potential growth, in the area and what additional capacity you may require. In the case of Okareka, the council has invested somewhere in the region of $2.9 million, has been carrying in its balance sheet as it did since 2009. In this scheme, we make an assumption that, and I use round numbers, we've got currently about 450 properties, houses, and we design the main trunks for a capacity of 550. That equates roughly to about $1.6 million from memory, of extra capacity. Now, if that doesn't occur in the next 20 years or 30 years, then the risk is that the council will carry that capital investment for that period of time. If the development additional houses occur in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, obviously, as they connect, they will pay their share. But from the network management perspective, it would have been sort of foolish for us not to build that capacity into the main pipes, to allow that to take place. So it is a risk we carry. And I estimate at this point in time, somewhere in the region of $1.5 million.
Thank you. Just one further question, Madam Chair, just around the funding, Thomas. So where we've said that funding is already built in, is that it says there's a... we're holding some funding already, so that if we're proceeding with this on the basis of that scheme there, the borrowing is simply what is in the scheme of 2 to 3 years under the current policy, another 15 to 17 million?
Yes, I think that comment relates to obviously the other financial support that we're receiving from other entities. So we will obviously, the balance will be funded by us and carried.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And can I indicate that I'm happy to second 2, 3 and 4 of the recommendation. Stavros, you've already outlined that there are 170 properties that couldn't comply with offset. But I think it's clear that the community's been calling out for the scheme with a degree of urgency, that there are a number of properties out there who have already attempted to upgrade or add on to their properties and have had to upgrade septic tank systems that will become obsolete in the future when reticulation goes in. So there's already a constrict to development by not having the scheme in place. So I think if you could confirm that's the case, that adds to the urgency of getting the scheme in place. And I think, with the fact that we don't need significant consents, we need to press ahead with speed. But my other question's already been asked, but it's just that currently there is a barrier to development in the community by not having the reticulation in place.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, it is quite correct. Some properties, I can't tell you off my head the exact numbers, they wanted to do modifications or development, but the regional council would not consent to installing septic tanks pending the reticulation. They want them to do offsets. And of course, it's very difficult for someone to incur the cost of offsets, which is somewhere in the region of $25,000 per property, only in 2-3 years' time to become redundant. So there is a degree of urgency to deal with it.
Thank you. And Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Stavros and Thomas for your detailed explanation this morning. My question is very shallow, but it reflects to bullet point 1 that says that the actual net capital cost of the scheme to be paid immediately upon completion. Is that the lump sum that we're talking about? And is the council at any stage going to be holding any money that if anybody gives a commitment that they will? commit to this scheme in conjunction with all the ratepayers, that they will pay up right when the completion is and when the works are completed?
So, Councillor, yes, it does refer to the lump sum. I think there's a lot of discussion around what are some of the options that are available to members of their community, and I know it's been discussed through the board and I think the Tarawera Sewage, the committee out there as well. I think we still have time to work through what those sort of options are. Obviously, any ratepayer out there can put a third of it into a savings account over a number of years and pay the lump sum at the time versus, borrowing against the property for, and I think as a certain councillor pointed out, a cost that's similar to, I guess, a kitchen upgrade for those as well. You've got to remember as well that there was the reason for affordability, but there's also a difference between how this scheme is funded versus Rotorua. Rotorua had a lot more government support because of the affordability issues and the deprivation challenges that community faced. This community is considerably different. Now, admittedly, that's not across the board. There are obviously pockets of challenges in that community as well. But the recommendation is obviously to continue on with the lump sum as we've modelled on our LTP for the previous two, and which is the current basis of the current one, which we're in discussions for. And should you wish to change that or consider other options, that should form part of the LTP discussion, preferably not part of this discussion, because then we can model and show you what the full impacts of it would be.
Thank you. And I dare say there are a lot of people, ratepayers out there at Tarawera, who are actually already formulating them for themselves right now how they intend to, to pay for this. So after all, it's been a number of years coming, so they've had time, and they'll be giving some thought to that, as I'm sure the Ratepayers Association will be as well. Thank you very much. So we have had, there's been some good discussion on that. Thank you very much for the presentation. Mr. Thomas, you did signal you wanted to move.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would like to move this recommendation, and if I could just make a couple of comments around it. I think the first one I would say is this is a hugely significant day for the Tarawera community, that we're seeing this move forward and presentation of this recommendation to going forward to council. That the Tarawera community has been engaged on this issue for a long period of time. The steering group's been there for 4 years, but before that, the community was working on that. And I would really like to acknowledge Libby Fletcher, who's in the gallery at the moment, who has driven and led this process from the community's side for many years and dedicated a huge amount of time to it. So I do congratulate Libby and the steering committee for all the work they've done. And also I'd like to recognise that it was that group that took the initiative to gain the $6.5 million fund that we've got. They funded the application and got a professional fundraiser in to do the application for them, and it was their efforts that achieved that, so well done. I have had a lot of experience with the Rotorua scheme, so I know how long these schemes take, but I know also how important it is to be actually getting some deadlines and some dates that community can look to, which is what this recommendation gives them, and some finality, and they can actually start planning for those costs. So I think the other thing I'd like to congratulate Stavros and his team on all the work that's been done here, and there's been a lot of engagement, not just with the community, but also with iwi over issues around this, and we've had 2 CIA reports and a lot of discussion around those. And while there will be some in the community that are disappointed that their ambition to have a localised treatment plant out there proved impractical, I think the overall awareness and acceptance is that reticulating back to join the Okirika scheme is the best way forward for that community. And I know a lot of people have mentioned the funding of it, and I'm not going to really say anything about that except thank you, Thomas, for suggesting that this is something we discuss in our LTP workshops, and I'm sure you'll be making time for us to have a talk about that. And I think instead of talking about a lump sum, what we need to be talking about is council's debt limits and how that would be affected. And there may be some lateral thinking that can come in here that provides flexibility for that community without overly burdening council's debt levels. So I look forward to that debate then. But with that, I'm very pleased to be able to move this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I presume you're moving 2, 3 and 4.
Yes, Madam Chair, 2, 3 and 4.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding us too that it is always the collective effort that gets us over the line. So thank you for that. And Councillor Donaldson, you'd like to make a comment as a seconder?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It was just to, I think, give some reassurance around the table that the questions quite rightly raised by Mr. Berryman Camp. So currently we have grinder pump reticulation all the way from Rotorua Marae right back to the in-town treatment plant. And Te Akau Road has very similar terrain and challenges for thrusting and reticulation, as does Spencer Road on Lake Tarawera. So over time, council's contractors and design engineers have built up skills around reticulating these communities, and the result, although it does carry some risks in terms of the hazards that we have in our rohi, I think those risks of contamination are far less than we have with existing septic tank systems in the Lakes community. So I'm delighted to see this going ahead. Going ahead with speed, having an in-catchment treatment plant would add substantial cost, but more particularly, I think would add significant time delays as well. And there's a real deal of urgency about moving on with the scheme. So I'm happy to support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Well, it has been moved and seconded, and if there are no further, Councillor Maxwell, were you? Oh, thank you.
I did have my hand up. Just to say that I support the recommendations, and Mr. Thomas and our Deputy Mayor have said it all, but I just want to say that reading through the report, when you said that the steering committee and all iwi Māori are involved in supporting this, it augurs well for the future for what's going to be happening out there. So I strongly support the recommendations here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maxwell. So we've had some good discussion on this morning. It has been moved and seconded, moved by Mr. Thomas and seconded by Councillor Donaldson. So I am going to put I'll put the 2, 3 and 4, and I will read them. 2, that the committee notes that the current funding policy for the Tarawera Wastewater Reticulation Scheme anticipates that benefited ratepayers will pay a lump sum for the actual net capital costs of the scheme immediately upon the scheme's completion and commissioning. 3, that the committee recommends to Council that the proposed Tarawera Wastewater Reticulation Scheme, comprising the installation of low-pressure grinder pumps onto each property and a mains pipeline connecting Tarawera to the Okarika wastewater pump station and hence to the main city treatment plant, is supported and agreed. And 4, that the committee recommends to Council to instruct officers to commence the process for the installation of the agreed scheme as per the procedure described in section 505.0 of this report and regularly report back to Council on progress. It has been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Thank you very much. Unanimously. So thank you. 6.2 of our staff report, and this is the deliberations on feedback on the Rotorua Lakes Council Prostitution Bylaw Statement of Proposal. Now that's on page 27. Could I ask, please, for a mover and a seconder that the report deliberations on feedback on Rotorua Lakes Council Prostitution Bylaw Statement of Proposal be received? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. It has been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. So, good morning, Morena Korua, Rosemary, Mayor JP. Thank you very much. And you're going to overview the report for us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, councillors, obviously the report has concludes probably a fairly comprehensive process that you've undertaken over the last year plus in reviewing the bylaw. So councillors, what we tried to do in the report, which probably added some additional complexity, was to really try and give you a decision-making tree to help structure your thinking and your consideration of the issues. So what I've done here today with Rosemary is we've probably summarised those key threads together in a presentation of approximately 5 slides. And really that presentation concludes with 2 recommendations for your consideration. So those 2 recommendations provide you with a view of the 2 potential pathways that capture sort of our key views of what those core recommendations are for you. So as I say, we've synthesised that decision-making tree down to 2 potential recommendations for your consideration. So I'll just take a few slides just to step you towards those, just so you get a feel for what those potential recommendations are. So councillors, you've seen this through the various reports previously that obviously prostitution in New Zealand was decriminalised under the Prostitution Reform Act in 2003. And that Act really allows councillors to establish bylaws to control or establish the locations of brothels and also rules around advertising for sexual premises. So obviously when we first went through a process and established our bylaw back in 2009, we were in a district plan review process. So you can see sort of how bylaws and district plans don't often synchronise. So this is a case now that we've got an operative district plan that came into effect, I think, in 2015, 2016, which also had some amendments around signage strengthened within that district plan subsequent to that as well. So again, some of those provisions that were considered originally in the bylaw or needed to be considered in the bylaw have been picked up subsequently in requirements in the final district plan we currently have. So we'll explore those a bit further, and of course most of those are detailed also within the report. So again, just talking about that process, councillors, so you can see there we've just tried to summarise that flow chart of where we've gone through. So obviously special consultative procedure discussion started back on the 23rd of November 2018 with no changes proposed. So again, that came through as a hearing in February 2019 with only 3 submissions received. Now obviously that came to the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee in March, and then there was a proposal there that created that. So really the question that was shaped at that point was, is a prostitution bylaw necessary, and are the provisions and the powers for the police and under the district plan appropriate and sufficient to address that? So you also had a report back on that process, which led to the most recent special consultative procedure, which was through July and August of this year. Now, since then, obviously, you've also heard from 30 submitters in a hearing. So the options around that special consultative procedure are detailed there on the right-hand side. Option A, retain the existing bylaw with no change. Adopt a new bylaw, so there's some details then about location and signage. Allow the current one to lapse or revoke it. So that's a simple decision. It's to be removed. It's just a case of timing. And then obviously also just let it lapse with a view that you're adding additional provisions or recommending additional provisions be built into the district plan. So you received 30 submissions, councillors. So just detailed more in your report, but the stronger number supported the option, I'm checking my colours here, option A. So if I just go back to that, which was the retain of the current one. But obviously a real divergence in views expressed, but critically also some degree of misunderstanding about the potential effects being discussed, which is a real challenge for you as elected members to sift through the actual real and potential effects versus those which are not quite so clear or not quite so realistic within our current provisions of the district plan. So that probably leads us to the next sort of key piece here, which is that discussion around additional protections. So this is the sort of fundamental question for you as elected members to traverse in your decision making today. And that's really that case of, is there a need for additional protections? And also making the decision that those additional protections need to be done through a bylaw above those applied to any other business that is controlled under the district plan or with police powers. So that's kind of the fundamental questions that you need to address. So that's bringing together different parts of that decision-making tree into that sort of single sort of statement of exploration for you as far as your decision-making is concerned. So we just thought it was important because a lot of the submissions and a lot of the comments have related to perceived behaviours, and this is really where we see people interpreting a view of what is seen as a brothel operating in a CBD translated into a description of a SUB operating within a residential area. So we just thought it was important just to take a little bit of time and almost explore in detail what we saw as what is actually proposed and considered as an undertaking within a residential area. So obviously the SUB is a small owner-operated brothel, so that's the first part. Like many small businesses, they may have little or any effects within a residential area, and like many businesses, people may not even be aware that they exist within a community. So hence our point there of saying client visitors may be quiet, discreet, or few in number and infrequent. I glibly compare it to the operations of an accountant and an accounting assistant within a community or a residential area. It may have similar effects, if any, to that kind of scale of operation. And like any other small business operating in a residential area or even a normal residential premise, there may be visitors throughout the day, there may be tradespeople, deliveries, and they may or may not be related to the business activity. So when we start getting into people's perceptions of some of the challenges or problems that exist in those SUB operating in a residential area, you start getting to those potential or perceived problems around levels of foot traffic, parking, and noise. And again, like many other different operations within a residential area, there is a question of scale and impact. There's been a number of complaints that we often field around the scale and operations of Airbnb, or again, some other small businesses. So are they different, and do they create different or more significant risk or potential effects? So as you're aware, the district plan defines home business operations. So in all cases, they can operate within our suburbs with up to 2 workers, where one of the workers must live there and be resident. So there's a condition of what we define as a SUB or a normal business operating in a residential area. So that's just that, wanting to be clear about that definition of what we're talking about here today. So across the report, we had this broken up just to try and keep it simple, and we probably failed to keep it simple by putting it into those different decision-making sections within the report. So we've just brought it back together again for you to see what the current tools are and what those provisions are covering. So obviously when we talk about location of brothels, so that's the fuller business size, it's not a SUB, there is rules in the district plan for how they operate and the fact that they must be operated within the CBD, so CBD focus. So with the locations of SUBs outside of the CBD, there's the small business rules that are detailed in the district plan. What's not covered in the district plan for a SUB is the ability to control the proximity to other sensitive sites. So that's why when I've shown you the column there and tools available, you see a nil next to the tools available. So the proximity to sensitive sites, if you believe that's an effect or an important factor, is not covered by the district plan currently. Signage, so again, some of the perceived or possible negative effects that people have traversed and we consider are offensive language, but there's obviously advertising standards, and as I've mentioned, we did make some significant changes to our signage requirements in the district plan in the last 2 or 3 years. Oh, might be further back, actually 4 years. So that highlights those provisions there, that there are existing tools within the district plan around those. Noise, parking are covered in sort of some of the nuisance behaviours, so noise requirements are stipulated in the district plan, but there's also summary offences and Land Transport Act, so parking on berms or on footpaths is things that we normally have to deal with. Amenity and the look and the feel. We don't stipulate that, and as we're effects-based within a district plan, it's very difficult to stipulate those things, so they don't exist within the district plan. But when you look at that description of a SUB, is that a relevant consideration at all? And then really the last part, we've sort of captured there on the touting and soliciting. Really what we're capturing in that discussion is offensive behaviour in public spaces. Now, in public order or disorder. So clearly that becomes something that people should be contacting the police for, but also we have our general bylaw for responses in that space. But equally there's other softer mechanisms we can do there, which is just again look at things like lighting, CCTV, and again some of the suggestions that had come back from some of the submitters was also the fact that there needed to be an informal group with various operators who could, in a way, take the informal route of discussing behaviours or inappropriate behaviours, and sort of the self-policing type option there as well. So again, this is trying to capture and pull together some of those tables you saw detailed and when broken up within the report. So, councillors, again, as I said earlier, we really had taken a view of trying to break down within the report each of those logic steps of your evaluation of decision points. What we've done now is really to bring those together and say, look, there's 2 main pathways for you to consider in your decision making, and this is intended to help you structure your discussions as to what you think is the appropriate course of action. So for us, the central question, and we touched on it earlier in the presentation, is there a need for additional protections through a bylaw above those applied to other business activities who must comply with the law and comply with the rules in our district plan? So on that basis, you've got 2 sort of fundamental decisions that we've tried to simplify there to if you believe the answer is no, then our recommendations would be that committee recommends to council that the positive negative effects of prostitution are adequately able to be managed via the district plan provisions and other regulatory mechanisms. So really that tries to capture those first set of decision points within the flow chart we provided you in the report. And on that basis, rather than letting the bylaw lapse, we would recommend the second part there, that the committee recommends to council that when you adopt this resolution at council at the end of the month, you're in effect revoking the bylaw. So that's the 2B. The alternative, councillors, is if you believe that that a bylaw is the most appropriate way. So again, we must tie that to piece. So if there's effects and you believe the most appropriate way is to use a bylaw, so we need to capture those words within the yes recommendation. Recommends to council that a bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing possible negative effects of prostitution, and that the proposed District Council Sex Workers Bylaw 2020 be adopted with the inclusion of the sensitive sites outside CBD and advertising as attached. So that is the bylaw as amended and attached to the report. So Council is happy to answer off any questions, but I'll leave that recommendation there, or we can go back through the table. But as a way, this is our attempt to try and consolidate that decision-making flow chart for you to clearly see the two pathways that we would recommend in your decision-making.
Thank you. Thank you, JP. It just really, when you put that little, the previous overhead up, it just really shows you how important it is, our district planners. Really, just actually shows you the thinking that we have to put into the district plan so that it can really, I suppose, cover most eventualities anyway. So thank you for putting that up. I thought that was very helpful. And we do have to bear in mind that it is a legitimate business activity, and so that it currently exists within our town. So thank you for that, speaking to your report there. Now I am going to open it up for some questions. Yes, and we'll take questions now. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, JP or Rosemary. Since we've had our bylaw in existence, are we aware of any complaints about the operation of brothels? And also, are we aware, either anecdotally or for evidence-based, on an evidence base, that there are SUBs already in operation outside of the CBD? Do we know the answer to that second part first, I guess, and then have we had any complaints to deal with since the bylaw's been in place?
And anecdotally, it is my understanding that there will be SUBs in existence. They're fairly discreet and most people will be unaware. I think the Prostitutes Collective in their submission indicated that for most SUBs, the discretion is really important, and I think they're aware of some, but a relatively small number.
I think on the first part, and I think it is highlighted in the report, and I just can't remember off the top of my head, my recollection is that there has been no complaints. I think it's important to also note that we didn't receive a submission from the police or I think Rotorua Public Health.
And just to clarify, if I could, Madam Chair, they were advised of the opportunity to make submissions, so none of the government agencies chose to.
That's correct. They were sent direct notice of the process at both rounds of consultation.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Kumar, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. Yeah, I think in Rotorua we're quite blessed that we don't have street prostitution, and while there may be some SUBs operating, I don't think currently there is a problem. It is quite self-regulating. They're going about. I think only the neighbours that are living close to it is what we've heard in the submissions are affected because they know it's there and it is. But by and large, we've never had it in the media. It's never been on the social media. So it's almost like they want to be discreet. They want to go about and doing. So it's not like in any of the clients that visit them, it's a decriminalized objective, and so it's not for other people to judge them. And any clients that goes out there, I think is very conscious of where they park, how they park. It's because it's not something that is deemed good in the community. So yeah, I believe the recommendations that have come over here are good, but like talking to a fellow councillor as well, don't think why we keep having this thing come up every 3 years. It's quite a safe industry, that it is a legal industry.
Councillor Donaldson, you want to?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure there'll possibly be other questions, but I'm happy to indicate I'll move 2A and 2B.
Move 2A and 2B, thank you.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper, thank you. Yes, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I sense there's been almost overkill in this piece of work, this piece of policy work. but I understand the subtleties. I particularly like the way that human rights have been protected systematically. The coherence with national law is quite explicit, and I like the way that the analysis has avoided the imposition of moral standards in a very diverse community, which has a range of views on this, and it's simply sensible for us to focus on the potential dangers. The only question I've got is the nature and the costs of implementation of this item number 3.
I think it comes back to, and Councillor Kumar raised it, whilst we have a bylaw, there is requirements that we review those bylaws. So again, the cost imposition has been around, while we have bylaws, we must go through that process of reviewing them when they fall due. And so it has consumed a significant amount of time and reporting over the last sort of 2 years whilst we've been working through this. So the actual implementation part is reasonably limited. So once you have a bylaw, the information is available. Our regulatory team add it to the other bylaws that they work with and provide information on. So I'd say limited cost for a bylaw of actually using it. It's more that cost and time and effort involved in the more regular reviews, and in the circumstances, because of the substantial amount of legal involvement and case law that often starts to traverse some of these bylaws about the validity of using a bylaw as a tool, it's increasingly expensive.
Yes, therefore, a supplementary, if I might. If that's the case, would it not be wise for us to default now to having this embedded in our district plan so that we don't have to go through this automatic routine of 3 yearly reviews? Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, councillors, changing the district plan to try and address issues, if you believe there are any issues, is an equally expensive process. I think the key here is that if you chose to go down the path of 2A and 2B, I think one of the things that would remain there is that as the team does their rolling district plan reviews and looks at options, a host of issues will be raised, and if there was anything in the way of complaints or views being expressed about challenges in the space, as the councillors pointed out earlier, there hasn't been to date. They might have made their way on to something of part of the district plan reviews, but at this stage it wouldn't be.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Thank you very much. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I don't really have any questions, but since there's been a move and a seconder for 2A and 2B, I would like to make a couple of comments, if there's appropriate time.
Fine.
Yeah. Look, firstly, I want to thank you, JP and Rosemary, for the presentation today. Having this extra information I found incredibly helpful. When I read through the agenda, I was going, oh, how are we going to do this? So really, really helpful, especially having that table of what tools we have in addition or instead of a bylaw. So thank you very much for that. Look, I want to say that I support the option 2A and 2B. When I looked through all this, I felt that there were either no negative effects of prostitution, or that they were covered in other legislation, and I think your table showed us that. When we had the submissions, this is obviously quite an emotional and moral issue for some people, and I don't put that down at all. I think we had some really good empirical data from some of the submitters as well. And one thing, a couple of things I took was, this is a legal business or a legal activity. Also, I did take the point from the Prostitutes Collective that by having this bylaw, it is forcing people into those larger brothels where they may be more vulnerable in terms of employment. And actually, the ability to be self-employed is something we all cherish as New Zealanders. So I'm supportive of being able to have the SUBs out there, especially if they're limited under the district plan to 2 workers. And I do note also the couple who presented on the effect having a brothel next door to them, and you know, it obviously did really affect them. But I also note they didn't know there was a brothel next door to them until someone actually knocked on their door, which drew their attention to it. Before that, obviously, it had been discreet enough that they hadn't really picked up what was happening there. So I think that's actually an indication that when these establishments are out in our community, they are discreet. I will admit that overseas, I have lived next door to a brothel, actually, and what I noticed about that was it was foot traffic going to it, but the men would hover down the end of the street until there was no one on the footpath, and then they'd whip down. So I think there's a certain discretion built into the activity on part of the customers. So look, I support 2A and 2B. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, and I must make sure that I'm get things correctly. So, Councillor Donaldson, as the mover and the seconder, you might like to speak, and I will open it up again then for further comments if there is any. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think, given the answers, you know, that complaints about sex working activity are virtually nil. Where's the problem? Bylaws are invoked to deal with the problem. And the reality is, I don't think we have a problem. That's been the experience. In terms of the sensitive sites, I think that's a very tricky one to try and regulate. If we were going to go down the path of a bylaw, I'm convinced by some submitters' statements that why is a residence not a sensitive site if they have children? So, you know, you're making a rod for your back with a bylaw. And so I think this is a case where less government is appropriate. And so, yeah, I'm fully in support of 2A and 2B. We can always bring in a bylaw at some future date if a problem does arise. But the $20,000 fine is a bit of a sledgehammer. I live in a 1 kilometre long street. Where there is a hairdresser, a beauty and nails therapist, and an acupuncturist, all operating home businesses. The traffic to those sites is dwarfed by the courier vans delivering home shopping, I have to say. So really, I don't see the problem, and so I leave it there, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Trump. I don't know, as a seconder, would you like to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know, Rosemary, you guys have put in a power of work around this, and I go back to when they first submitted from the Prostitutes Collective, and our committee actually debated, and the reason why we actually wanted to go back was to actually probably look at revoking the bylaw, and I know I voted against actually going back up for submissions. The submitters, bless their socks, didn't actually realise what they were doing. A lot of it was historical information, and the submission that actually carried the most weight for the second time was the Prostitutes Collective, and I think they've worked extremely hard in this industry across the country, and I think they're professionals. They know what they're talking about, and they know how to protect their girls. And look, hey, it's a business. We're not here to be judge and jury. So that's why, I have to support 2A and 2B. I believe the only solution for us is to revoke this bylaw in keeping with some of the other cities around the country that are revoking the laws.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Are there any further comments this morning? Thank you very much. Can I just say I do agree with Councillor McPherson when Councillor McPherson said we are a diverse community, and so the decisions that we make around this table must show that we are inclusive of all members of our society, and their views, that we respect their views, and also that we make our decisions based on fairness and wanting people to feel that that they're valued in our community and they have a place as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for the discussions this morning. It has been moved and seconded, moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Mrs. Trumper, and I am going to read now 2 and 3, the recommendations 2 and 3 that have just disappeared. So, thank you. If they're coming back, otherwise I'll read them from... Here we go, thank you. 2A, that the committee recommends to Council that the possible negative effects of prostitution are adequately able to be managed via the district plan provisions and other regulatory mechanisms. And 2B, that the committee recommends to Council that the current bylaw be revoked following the November Council meeting. I'll put that motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you, carried. Kia ora, well done. Thank you. So, 6.3, our next item on the agenda, the hearings and deliberations on the proposed revocation of Pururu Reserve North. That's our one. That's it. Thank you. Could I ask for a mover and a seconder, please, that the report be received? Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Thank you, Councillor Kumar. That the report, hearing and deliberations on proposed revocation of Pururu Reserve North be received. I'll put that motion. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Right. That's... see, that's that. Sorry, we've got... Now, who have we got? Oh, Gina and Stephanie. So they're going to... Thank you, Morena Gina. Mayor Stephanie, thank you. Morena Korua, you're going to overview the report. Thank you. And to our manuhiri there who have just joined us, Aroha, tēnā koe, Morena. Nice to see you here with your whānau this morning. Kia ora.
Kia ora. I think the layout for today is that the submitters will, those that wanted to do a verbal submission will present their submissions first, and then we'll present the staff report after that.
Oh, thank you. There was a second part to that too, wasn't there? 1 and 2. I've taken 1 and 2 together. Thank you. Sorry, 3 submitters today: Aroha Bray, Tawhiri Moirahu, and Mary Puti Corbett. Is that correct? No? Just, oh, fine, the 3. Thank you. So, Aroha, would you like to come and present your, speak to your submission? Thank you. Morena, kare.
Morena, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to my submission regarding the proposed revocation of the classification of the Pururu Reserve North piece of land. I support the Rotorua Lakes Council resolving to revoke the classification of the reserve and send the resolution to the Minister of Conservation for final approval pursuant to Section 24(2)(e) of the Reserves Act 1977 and return the reserve to the Taharangi Marae Trust Board. If the revocation of the reserve is approved by Council and the Minister of Conservation, it is proposed to vest the land as Māori reservation pursuant to Section 338 of Part 17 of the Te Ture Whenua Māori Land Act 1993 to trustees representing the people of Taharangi Marae, also known as Tarewa Pounamu Marae, and I understand that this will require a formal application to the Māori Land Court. I understand also that the revocation of the reserve classification of Pururu North Reserve is not considered significant under Council's Significance and Engagement Policy 2017. However, I believe the vesting of the reserve land is very significant to the people of Ngāti Kiaroa, Ngāti Tuara. I support the Council Committee assigned to this particular piece of work to make a recommendation to the full Council at the next appropriate meeting to resolve to revoke the classification of the reserve and make a resolution for the disposal of the Council-owned property. Thank you.
Thank you, Aroha. Thank you for that. Tawhiri Moirahu, Carl. Thank you. Mary Puti Corbett. Morena, Mary.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Tihi o tonga te pai maunga, ko i te hina te awa, ko te arawa te waka, ko Ngāti Tuaranga, te Kearo, ngā hapu, ko Tarewa Pauna me te marae, ko Mary Corbett Hayes. So I'm Mary Corbett. So my submission was to support the return of the land. I am the daughter of Patu Rahiruhi, who gifted the land to the District Council. I live at Tarewa Road. I've been there all my life. I also work at the marae. I work for a iwi social service provider that works in this community, helping needy whānau. Tarewa means everything to me. That's my home. The people on that road are my whanaunga. So everything that happens down there concerns me. For us as a whānau, and we've had a hui as a whānau, that we would like the land to be returned to us so that we could use it to benefit the community, to benefit us as Māori. So in short, that's just my submission to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou.
Thank you.
Tuatahi kei te mihi atu au ki Ngāti Kearo, Ngāti Tuara, me ngā māngai o te marae, kua hara mai nei ki te tautoko i tēnei kaupapa. Mihi atu kia koutou. Me tō koutou kia whakatika i tēnei kaupapa, tēnā koutou. Thank you for the time to present our report. I will hand over to Steph to present the majority, but I'm available for questions.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So just to recap, I guess, the process to date, this committee resolved in September last year to commence a process to revoke the status of the reserve.
Excuse me, Stephanie, can you just move your microphone closer? Thank you.
Oh, certainly. So this committee resolved in September last year to commence the Reserves Act process to remove the reserve status of Pururu Reserve. That required a consultation process, which commenced in February of this year. Consultation was undertaken with all the residents around Tarewa Road, including all of the off-streets. It was put out to the wider community through all of Council's normal channels, and individual stakeholders, including and iwi organisations, were consulted directly. We received 9 submissions, all in support, and you've heard 2 people speak to their submissions today. So the next steps in this process is for the committee to make a recommendation to Council. Assuming that they approve that, I just want to be clear that the final decision rests with the Minister of Conservation, and following that there would be a process to vest the reserve as a Māori reservation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'm happy to open it up for questions. Thank you. Yes, Councillor McPherson.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much, all submitters. Much appreciated. Just some technical questions, please. When you refer to the reserve, what are the boundaries? How is the land currently used? How is it proposed to use it? And the most important probably is your closing comment was the final decision we made by the Minister of Conservation. What are the key criteria that are going to be used to make that decision?
In terms of the current use of the reserve, it has an old tennis court on it that hasn't been used for quite a number of years and hasn't been maintained. As far as I'm aware, and from the submissions we received, it doesn't have any recreational use anymore. And that really is the key test for the Minister, is whether it's required for recreation purposes any longer. There is a large amount of reserves in that area, so the provision is really high within that, particularly with Kura Park just across the road. So that will be their main test. It is quite a high test, so it really is up to the Minister at the time whether they think that's appropriate or not.
And the proposed use?
So we would not be putting any constraints on the return of that land. The land was... Essentially what happened was that the owners of the land built the tennis courts themselves and then gifted it to the council for public use as a tennis court. It's no longer being used for that purpose, so the purpose for which the gift was made has fallen away. That being the case, we wouldn't put any restrictions on it because it was given for a particular purpose which we no longer require it for. I would also note, I just wanted to add that Cuido Park was also a significant part of that, including where the aquatic centre is, was also gifted by the same people. So there's been a considerable history of donations of land for the community. So we certainly wouldn't be putting any restrictions on that. The intention is, though, that it would be held by the trustees appointed to administer the marae, which is across the road. So they would, be looking at how they can support the marae reservation. At the moment, the marae reservation includes wharenui, wharekai, but also a number of buildings that are used for social service programs. There are a number of programs through MSD and also the police and justice, which are run through the marae. So it's a very significant social sector contributor as well, and I'm sure they will make some good decisions about how they use that land to support the marae.
Thank you for that. I strongly support this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Tēnā kōrua o tira, tēnā koutou. And through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to move recommendation 1, 2 and 3. And also just make comment that used to be where I learnt to play tennis down Tarewa Road. I have significant ties to that, and it's wonderful to finally see our whenua returned. So kia ora ki a koe hoki, Robin. Nā tō māma, me tōna tungane, e nei whenua, I ko haina, ki tēnei kaunihira, ka tika, me whakahoki a te whenua, ki tōna u kaipō.
Thank you. So, thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Oh, sorry, you would like to speak, Councillor Maxwell? Oh, thank you. Yes, I know you've seconded, but you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'm more than happy to second this motion. Not that I was a very good tennis player in the day when it was really a thriving tennis club and produced some very good players within this area. But on the social side, yes, it was a very good thriving clubhouse there. But reading the history of the place, I was aware that the Klaua Patirai Ruhi gifted that in 1964. So that's been some time ago. And the marae there, Taharangi, they've really grown, and they even have a youth justice court there at the moment, if I recall. But I think this is a very good case where if land was gifted in the first place and it's not being used for any recreational things at the moment, in this case, it is only right and just that we return it to the original owner. So I'm more than happy to support this.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd just like to offer my support for this as well. And just to point out that the previous council, through SPNF and the actual council meeting, were very supportive of starting this process, and it is great to see this come back to us and see it nearly completed. And I think it is in line with council's recent policy to return land to its original owners where possible, and we've done this for a number of areas and parts of reserves over the last few years, and fantastic to see this come back to us today.
Thank you. Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded. Can I just say that I actually live in this street, Tarewa Road, and I've lived there for the last couple of years, and I'm very conscious of the fact that there are whānau up and down the street who have lived all of their lives in that street. We've had some recent community meetings, and when I hear people get up and say, I've lived here, I was born here, and my auntie and uncle and koro still live down the road. And so that's absolutely wonderful. It's wonderful to know that, I'm very privileged to live there, as indeed most of us are, within the city of Rotorua. Here's this strong whānau and living on their lands and with the social services that you provide for Taharangi, I think that's really wonderful. So it's a privilege to be living in the area and on your tribal lands. So I'm very happy to be supportive of this today as well. So it has been moved and seconded. I am going to put it, there's only this third part of our point 3 that's to be moved and seconded, which it has been, that the committee recommends to Council that pursuant to Section 24 of the Reserves Act 1977, the reserve classification of Pururu Reserve North being part Tarewa 6B block and part Tarewa 6C block be revoked. It has been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Kia ora. So there you go. That's been carried. I am going to take the next item before I call for a break. We go into our, which is 6.4 on our agenda, page 62, the Economic Recovery Project 2, Te Pūtake o Tawa investment. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, that this report be received? Mrs. Trumper, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Wang. I'll put that motion that the report Economic Recovery Project 2, Te Pūtake o Tawa investment be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Thank you, JP.
Good morning, everyone, for a second time. So I've just got a short presentation, councillors, just to give some context and just to go into a bit more detail around this proposal for application of the Economic Recovery Task Force funding. So it's been titled that Te Pūtake o Tawa investment, but actually this forms part of a wider forest investment. So whilst some of the structures are based here, actually it builds the network in the forest. So I just wanted to again highlight our Economic Recovery Task Force outcomes that we're still trying to make sure we measure all of the projects we bring to you against. This is associated with the $29 million that you identified across 2 years through the annual plan process to support sort of investment around jobs and a Build Back Better approach that sees us come through the current COVID process and depression stronger and with a better sector. I'm also joined on my right by Andrew. Hey, Andrew. So councillors, again, those are those outcomes there. So immediate and or sustainable job creation is one of those. Increased economic resilience for our economy. Now, I say that, and it's particularly important as this project relates to our tourism sector. Immediate delivered impact, increased community wealth, leveraging of external funding, and strengthened Te Arawa partnerships and promoting sustainability. So as we get into this presentation, I'll just highlight a bit more detail of those key areas of this investment that tags against some of those particular outcomes. So you've seen these slides before, councillors. So we've presented a couple of these slides when we talked about crankworks. So the forest is a significant asset for us as a destination. It's a huge attractor of visitors, whether they're mountain biking. So in front of you here, you can see the figures around the growth in mountain bikers that have been measured through the clickers we have at the Waipa site. But it's important to remember that the forest is not just for mountain bikers. There's a lot of walkers and a lot of runners and a lot of families who enjoy a very special place that is freely available to our community. And parking within the forest, but equally accessing the dog walking area in the Sion campus as well. So when you think about these numbers, it's also important to remember the 600,000 odd people that used to go through the visitor centre. So whilst we've had the impact of loss of overseas visitation, which affects some of that traffic through Long Mile and the visitor centre, New Zealanders are still enjoying our country, and 60% of our visitation to this destination is from New Zealanders. So hugely important piece of our destination value and create significant visits and revisits. So the development of the forest is pretty important for us to see about repositioning the tourism sector, but also supporting us as we see through this period and eventually see the return of international, so that value and uplift. So again, just showing you there just that change in equivalent period, so that kickback directly after lockdown compared with the same period last year. So I think as New Zealanders, we suddenly decided after lockdown we needed to get back out there and enjoy the outdoors. You would have read in many articles around the country, around the world, people discovered bicycles with some vim and vigour after lockdown as well. So again, just we've all talked about previously the numbers of people who commute to the district from Hamilton, Tauranga and Auckland. And again, just seeing the impact of the Auckland lockdown was quite significant. We are the playground for many of those areas, so the forest is critically important to that. Economically, just the bike space creates a massive ecosystem of businesses within our community. So these were the directly related businesses who we refer to. But equally important is the petrol station, the accommodation providers, some of other retail and the cafes and the restaurants that benefit from the visitation we get from those people from around the country. And as I say, the forest is a valuable destination and piece of infrastructure for us. So on that basis, clearly we've been working our way through a project delivery which was part of the Provincial Growth Fund application, so a total project cost of 14.5 million. So we're very well advanced in that. So we've done most of the works through Pūtaki-o-Tawa, Long Mile, and most of the way into the completion of the forest loop, and work soon to commence on the link between the city and the forest as well. So if you remember the balance, it was $6 million from the Provincial Growth Fund as a grant and 1.5 million as a loan. The loan being particularly tagged to the visitor centre construction, so another piece of infrastructure still to complete. So the commercial operators have now been identified out of Te Pūtaki-o-Tawa, so that was announced at the opening that was held a few weeks ago. And so again, with a view of the need to see the development of that location, which is the second main access point for mountain biking into the forest and walking into the forest. I say second destination or location for that access because Waipa is still the critical and first access point for mountain bike access and for some of those walkers and runners access points as well. So what's being proposed here is that the operators have taken a view of saying, look, we just need to gauge the business. So we're intending and investing into sort of porter cabin type operations at this stage before they take the significant step into investing into more substantial buildings at the car park area at Hub 2. So in ensuring we try and keep that view of the quality of that location, what we've proposed here is to construct a large deck area and covered deck area that would sit between these cabins and really just lift the quality standard of that location. When they make the decisions to move to more permanent buildings and they're installed somewhere else on site, this deck area covered would operate as a sort of a picnicking area, but during events it would also operate as an event stage area as well. So we see it as a longer term investment by council, to support the initial business setup, but in the longer term once they move to more permanent buildings. The second part of what we've asked for today is that one of the first sections of trail around the forest loop that was constructed was the Kotukutuku track, which runs alongside Green Lake. So eventually it drops down to the Green Lake Road. Now, what we've seen, unfortunately, or depends on how you see it, is that piece of trail has been, was absolutely hammered because it was just such an awesome piece of trail. So we had a huge number of people coming to Rotorua to ride that piece of track, e-bikers particularly. Now, what that did was exacerbate a problem that already existed for the Green Lake Trust or the Rotorua Trust, which was a lot of people being pulled down towards the lake and really just choosing to swim in the lake or come back and swim in the lake. So whilst it may not have been the mountain bikers, it did bring more people and more awareness to that location. So it's been closed for a period of time. So whilst it was intended to be a critical part of the Round the Forest Loop, in its current state where it brings people down too close to the lake, it's not appropriate. So what's being proposed is that an A route will take you along Tikitapu Road, and that will form part of the forest loop. But the intention here is to actually invest in an additional piece of trail, which actually adds an exceptional 4.8 kilometres of trail, which would be a B route, which takes you out towards State Highway 5 and really enables us to work more closely with the Rotorua board to protect that access or prevent people from accessing the lake, which is hugely important. And the last piece is to provide some additional funding to enable some trails to be built that finish down to Putaki Otawa and some other trails in the forest, which would be done through the Trails Trust. So they are they've got a number of approved trails. They fundraise to deliver those trails, but they're unable to deliver them at the moment because they've had challenges raising those funds. So this is a way for us to accelerate some trail building, both with private contractors, so keeping jobs and providing opportunities, but also to support the Trails Trust and investing in building some of the approved trails. There's also a discussion about working closely with Tuhirangi about bringing through some trail builders in the maintenance and the development of some of those trails as well. So that's the three key elements of what's been requested today. And we see this as a significant opportunity to really enhance the product that we're creating. The Round the Forest Loop will be an exceptional trail. And once it's opened, we will move into a phase 2, which will be looking to talk to NZCT about further investment to provide an alternative to the footpath route back to the city. So again, just a couple of slides there. So that's just a view of the deck or covered deck area we're talking about, with the cabins on 2 or 3 sides here, 2 sides. So that's the bike hire and cafe access. The operators have also agreed to put on a shuttle to go through there through the summer, just to test how that is. And we're already starting to see increasing numbers of people using sections of the Round the Forest Loop before it's fully opened. You can see there on the map on the right, we've just tried to give you a feel for the location, and I've tactically dropped a red arrow onto the photo just to give you an idea of where that is too. So it's further along into the car park, along from the toilet block for those who took part in the opening a few weeks ago. So again, I'll refer back to the discussion we just had. So you can see there a bit more detail about the road arrangements there. So you can see the current trail, which drops you back down onto the Green Lake Road. So at that point, we often saw cyclists who've enjoyed that first piece of trail build. They either loop back around and head back up towards Tikitapu, or they continue on and head out along the road. But all of this just adds to the number of people who are getting down close to the lake and being aware of that access point. So that's sort of adding to that problem that we're seeing there. So what is being proposed there, and this is that 4.8 kilometre extension, is the yellow line. So before it starts dropping off the face of below Tikitapu Road, it will stay high and will extend all the way through almost to the right, currently above Una's Head. So there's my placement over there. So that's the extension. So really we also will be closing and terminating a couple of other trails that drop you down onto the Green Lake Road area. So really important that we just work with the board, but also with CNI and Tuhirangi to just make sure we get that trail placement well. So as I said, as part of the Round the Forest Loop, that will give us an A and a B route. So for those whose fitness is not quite up to it, they can stay up on Tikitapu Road. or those who want a bit more of a single track experience will be able to drop down onto the trail and ride pretty much all the way through. So a few more turns and twists in there. So again, an A and a B line will be created in there. And again, hopefully we'll be boosting the visitation and extending that appeal for people to use that trail. So if I just go through their investment rationale, so we are building an exceptional product for around the forest. Again, it adds to its appeal as a domestic destination. As I say, when that trail first opened above Green Lake, we saw a huge number of e-bikers coming across from Tauranga to experience that trail. So again, it's part of that wider appeal than just your traditional mountain bikers. Very family accessible forest loop, but equally for those on e-bikes as well. So these initiatives will provide work for both the Trails Trust and contractors over the next 6 months. It complements the investment we're already making and strengthens our subsequent applications to New Zealand Cycle Trails for further investment in that. And for us also, supports those businesses who are establishing in Te Pūtake o Tawa, so critically important in that space as well. As I say, the strength of us as a destination will be significantly enhanced for mountain bikers. So, councillors, that's why we've really put this forward. You can see there the option is to fund the additional $500,000 to go into the forest development. Alternative is we just fund some part of it. We've put there as a subset is to consider funding only part of what we've suggested today, or not fund any additional investment at all. But as we would say, the rationale for us is strongly around doubling down on a significant high-value piece of our destination that attracts New Zealanders to visit our place and experience some of our unique offerings here, which is even more important in the current replacing and respacing of the tourism sector. So happy to answer any questions, unless Andrew wants to add anything at this moment. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for that. I'll have to take your word for it that it's stunning up there, because I'm quite risk averse, so I doubt where I'll ever get around that whole track. But thank you for that presentation this morning. Sounds rather exciting. Yes, I'll open it up now for questions. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. And this is just thank you for the presentation. That's excellent to see it looking ambitious. I look forward to that. But I do want to just ask, you've got some beautiful Māori names here to name some of these pathways. And then you've got Kung Fu Walrus, so it is kind of a left field question. But can you please explain why that was named that?
I suspect I might have to give this over to Deputy Dave. But look, in all honesty, most of the names of the more recent built trails have been named by Tuharangi or Whakaui as the mana whenua for those areas. Certainly there were some trails, I think, that predate that had alternative names. Certainly that's one of those areas, I think, as that piece of branding work continues for the whole of the forest, as an opportunity to maybe revisit some of those.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to add to the kōrero, because I was put on the spot 2 nights ago down at Whakarewa Village when the artists who, under the existing contract with the PGF for providing a cultural overlay to the Whakarewa Forest redevelopment, presented their concepts for art installations. There's 5 artists collaborating to do some stunning art to be installed at Te Pūtake o Tawa. Did their presentation. I referred to the journey that's been on. So pretty much the trail infrastructure in the forest has been built by the community. And the landowners graciously recognise that in continuing to allow the community free access to the estate, their estate, for recreation. And so it is a fantastic partnership and a fantastic collaboration. But quite some time ago, when one particular trail was being considered by the Mountain Bike Club, and I was on the committee at the time. Department of Conservation, because it went through adjacent scenic reserve, advised myself that we had to consult with mana whenua. So I met with Anu Rangahuia and Rangi Puafi Maika to consult with them about, first of all, the placement of this trail through adjacent scenic reserve, and as part of that discussion, an appropriate name. And so the name Tuhotoariki, the tohanga who was buried in the Tarawera eruption, was arrived at. And it became obvious that the significance of that forest to mana whenua iwi should be reflected in the signage and the names of the trails, and that's how this has evolved over time. But back in the day, trails got all sorts of names. You know, at one stage, bike manufacturers were sponsoring trails, and we had Diamondback Trail, and that's long gone. Split Ends after the rock group, you know, the band and others still endure. But gradually over time, trail names reflect the history of the area and assist with the interpretation. So that's where we get to.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, JP, and thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. I think, alongside what Councillor Yates has already mentioned, I think this is a really ambitious plan, and I think we've seen a massive response from Kiwis supporting local and, you know, visiting our enjoying and visiting our backyard. And I think, you know, since the opening of Te Putaki o Tawa, and the easing of traffic at the Waipai entrance, which I think will make it a lot safer as well. I mean, the amount of times that we've driven past and it's just been chocker, it's, you know, you raise the questions of safety at that intersection. I'm also really glad that the Lake Rotorua track will be altered and the cultural impacts there taken seriously and action is being made on it. But my question was, what have been the numbers using our forests since the lockdown, since the pandemic? Have we seen it, I mean, with the result of no international tourists, only relying on domestic? Has it been, you know, have we seen a big jump as compared to previous years?
Through the chair, yep, look, certainly that graph there has the movements for Waipa. But I think it's safe to say when we've looked at the remainder of the figures, some of the single busiest days that we've ever had in that forest in terms of the numbers of the counts have been since that first lockdown. So without a doubt, you know, we've seen people flocking to that. I think that's been borne out. If you go and try and buy a bike at the moment, you'll probably struggle. Certainly there's a lot of Kiwis getting out there and making the most of these types of assets. Yeah.
Thank you, and I'd just like to signal to the Chair that I would like to move recommendation 2 when we come to it.
Thank you, Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was also going to signal that I'd be happy to support that, so I can second that motion, subject to a promise that we will actually use wood first in our deck and our...
Thank you.
Now that I've got it on record, I'm happy to second it.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, JP. JP, while listening to some of the merits on this and while seeing that it's already been moved, while also being empathetic to the fact that it is an economic recovery project, I will not support it on the basis that it's been a tough year. We are in COVID-19 recovery phase. We have given to the Forest Hub in times of crisis, and we had recently debated quite a contentious money lending around that. Now, when it comes to another $500,000, and while it may be good, I believe there are other aspects of Rotorua that could do with ratepayer funding of $500,000. While this is going to be a good idea at this stage for how it's presented. I did hear you say that there is a proposal that it could further be enhanced if this is successful. But now that there is a business plan, I just believe that's an hearsay. So while it might be passed around the table today, I, at this stage, will not support it.
Thank you, Councillor Kuma. Councillor Kai Fong. Oh, did you speak? Oh, sorry. Hang on. Thank you. I know. So I'll take Councillor Maxwell and then I'll come back to the mover. Thank you.
So what can I ask? Is there a seconder to the motion? Yeah. Hi. No, I just said I heard Councillor Wang move it. But speaking in support of the motion, you know, we all are aware during these COVID times that tourism has taken the biggest hit in our community, and where we've been able to support some of the proposals that have come up, they've done us well. A good example is we supported some time ago assisting the film industry, and they built their not a studio but warehouse looking after film things. And I believe, and I've even run into some of the people who've got jobs out there working there, that is going successfully. And there was the support from council helped to get that project on the way. But I think with us approving and supporting this 500,000 for this will make a huge difference. And I can recall only just some months back we went out to at the Waipa end of things, and Councillor Wang is right. It'll take a bit of pressure off that end of the forest. We were out there at that new venture that some people have set up, something spa, foot spa and various things. I could not get over how many bike riders, bicyclists and people who rode past there to head down to that area. And I think even into the future, allowing for access for the 440 cars and the buses that are there, it can also assist in our local tourism. And when the borders open, tourism where they can be let off at one part of it, ride a bike, and the buses can go around and collect them, like they do overseas. Our sister city, Beppu, has not something like this, but a kind of a skyline ride, where that's what they do for a lot of the tourists. So with those few words, Madam Chair, I'm strongly supportive of this. I think it's a good investment. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'd like to ask if the mover and the seconder would like to, Councillor Wang and Councillor Kai Fong, if you'd like to make any remarks before I put it open for full discussion, as the mover and the seconder.
Thank you. I think I saw some hands go up on some comments and questions.
No, I'll take yours first, thank you, if you'd like to, just so that I can open it up for questions, for further discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I think most of what I wanted to say I've already said. I mean, you saw from the huge, the massive numbers that have been using our forest, and the return, $26 to $43 million per annum estimated spend in Rotorua as a result of mountain biking, $500,000 in this plan, and it is an economic recovery. Sorry, it is an economic recovery fund. That's its purpose, and from from the further on from the coming out of the pandemic, I think something like this to support our local economy is very, very critical, and to have the Kiwis supporting local and just enjoying our backyard. I think it's very clear that this. I absolutely support this.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm happy to support this project as well. And it's not just about the immediate jobs, but it's also thinking about the long term. So I think what's good about this is that it's actually building infrastructure that's actually going to last in Rotorua for a long, long time and have a much longer flow-on effect for our community. And the other thing is too is that I think that it's really good that we've leveraged that relationship with iwi and the partnership that we've got there to be able to enable this project to proceed. So I'm very supportive of it.
Thank you. Mrs. Trumper, and it's open for discussions. Oh, thank you. Oh, actually, Councillor Donaldson, I have seen your hand popping up and down, so I will take yours first. Thank you. Sorry, Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a question, and then following that, I'm happy to make a comment. So my question through you, Madam Chair, Andrew, the two concessions that have been awarded and were announced by the CNI Chair at the opening of Tipo Taki o Tawa were as a result of an RFP process run by Rotorua Economic Development, I understand. Can you tell me, and I appreciate details may be subject to commercial sensitivity, but is that the end of the commercial investment out there in terms of what the forest owners are happy to accommodate and the expressions of interest for further investment, commercial investment at that site?
The simple answer is it's not the end, and that the forest owners are still, will be working through a process to look at what additionally might come forward.
So thank you, Madam Chair. I will make a couple of comments, and I absolutely support the recommendation, and I endorse the comments of the mover and seconder. Equally important to tourism and to providing jobs and construction is the events sector. So the events sector has been hammered. They've had their business taken from under their feet through the pandemic. However, they've been very quick to bounce back, and we've seen, for example, at Labour Weekend, the Waka 100 bounce back and pivot into something of a forest festival. And on the Saturday, so the day before the mountain bike race, there were 7,500 people recorded as entering the forest across the Waipa Bridge, just on that one day of Labour Weekend. So the events industry, the mountain bike club runs a 3 race enduro series. They've had round 1, but round 3 in February next year is already sold out. So all rounds of that have been sold out just by the domestic visitation that's proposed for that. So just with those few words, I think, this business case really stacks up as appropriate use of the COVID Recovery Fund, Madam Chair. Happy to support.
Thank you. Mrs. Trumper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got a couple of really small questions. Really, Andrew, I'm not sure, either you or JP, around the Te Ara Ahi track and where this fits in. I had read somewhere that there was going to be getting the concrete raceway is being sort of demobilised, so to speak, or decommissioned, and whether that fits in there. And the other question I have, and it's only a small one, is around the walkers and the horse riders, because at Waipa South, I know the floats are parked there, and they actually go riding down to the Green Lake. So I'm just wondering how that is all going to be protected and to protect the lake from the walkers.
I'll do my best through the chair. The current Te Ara Ahi Great Ride remains until we have had final approval from New Zealand Cycle Trails that we are able to establish the forest loop as a great ride. Our advice would be at that point we would downgrade Te Ara Ahi to what they call a heartland ride, which is probably more appropriate for the quality of the experience that you receive when you're on that link. There have been some other discussions about making sure that it feeds into a network that rides through the Taupo and so forth, which might just be some signage and so forth, improvements that are being considered at the moment by various parties. In terms of your second question, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to think in terms of there is additional guidance going up around walking and the equestrian riders or horse riders in terms of what's appropriate for them around there. There are some existing trails and so forth in that area that, with a couple of extra signs, it's pretty easy to make some additional loops that don't require people to go down to Green Lake Road. Yeah.
I just have one comment,
Certainly.
well, just a couple of comments really. Oh, sorry, JP.
Madam Chair, I'm looking across at Gina, who might just add to what I say. But you'll recall that we'd worked previously with CNI about an overall, and they agreed a master plan for the forest themselves. So are very conscious of the conflicts between different users in different locations. So that master plan really started to crystallise that view that Waipa was the main access point for mountain biking and walkers runners. Long Mile obviously was the shorter walking loop and kind of that higher volume, trying to deter that as a mountain biking access point. But equally, the longer term view was that the horse access or the horse riders would also come out of that to a new location as well. And then finally, what we've just done with Te Pūtaki o Tawa is establish that second walking mountain biking access point as well. So you're correct, there is a last piece of that, which was to put in place that access point for the horse riding fraternity. And again, just make sure we were able to keep separate and keep everyone safe in their different locations and provide trails and access that they require. So that's something we've been working with CNI and Mana Whenua for a number of years. So that's the direction we're going in. So again, part of that also related to locations of spray irrigation and whether that freed up some space. And I think that formed part of that discussion. So it's kind of an abeyance at the moment. So we're just trying to make sure there is sufficient access for all users to avoid those conflicts.
Thank you. And I just really, I look at this track, it's beneficial to more than just our local ratepayers. And for an investment per ratepayer or rateable property of $17, I think it's actually a really great return on investment when you look at the money that those people that are moving or actually come to Rotorua just to go biking. I mean, we went for a drive one day over to Hamilton and I think every car had bikes on the back and it was just a significant number all the way to Cambridge. It was just phenomenal. So I think that we need to be thinking ahead, and this is what the recovery does. We're absolutely, I follow Councillor Kaifong's remark that, we have to be ready and not worrying about trying to find money for something like this in about a couple of years' time when we start to return to business as usual. So I'm 100% behind this.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Mr. Thomas and then Councillor Tapson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Look, I just want to say I fully support this and the 500,000. I too see it as a very valid use of this economic recovery fund that we've put in place. It is an economic activity. I think that previously we've had presentations around the benefits of completing the loop. So I think that's really important in terms of the economic gains for Rotorua, in terms of people using the area and it becoming a great ride. I think that's fantastic. I think putting in the infrastructure at where at the car parking area is really important. I think if anyone's been up there in summer, you know how hot it gets. So once people aren't actually out riding and stuff, being actually able to get under some shelter is incredibly important. But the most important thing for me is protecting the tapu nature of the Green Lake. I think removing those tracks going down to it and creating the new track is really great. I hope that the incidence of people swimming there are people from out of the Rotorua who aren't aware of the significance of the lake. I know from my first memories, I always knew that it was tapu, and it makes it very special in our community in Rotorua. We've got a lot of fantastic lakes for swimming and boating and all sorts of water activities. It makes it unique that is kept aside, and so we do need to be protecting that. So congratulations on actually working with the trustees there and hopefully solving that issue.
Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. And kia ora korua. Look, when it first came up, I thought to myself, investment again into mountain biking. And I think probably a few of us thought that. But when you come here with the facts and you look at that, and thank you, Shirley, for breaking that down into investment per ratepayer, because the economic impacts are huge. So I'm happy to support it, not only because of that, but also because of the wider physical and mental health impacts that this has on our locals. We've been through an incredibly challenging time this year, and you can never underestimate the ability to use our great asset, go into the forest and just be able to enjoy yourself. So for those reasons, I'm happy to support. But for me, accessibility is also very important, ensuring that all of our locals can afford to be there and to use it. So my question is actually around the investment in the infrastructure. And I do note that in the report it mentions that somewhere in the report it mentions that the large building in Waipa still remains largely untenanted. So I just wanted to confirm whether we're confident that at short notice the investment into the deck area will be able to be tenanted, but also in terms of accessibility for all, just if you could reassure us that that investment into infrastructure will be widely accessible to the public and not restricted only for customers of those commercial operators.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Look, there is clear support for this recommendation. So what I'm going to ask now, if there is anyone who wishes to speak against this motion, I'll hear that. Otherwise, I'm going to put the motion. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Sorry, did you have a question? Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Oh, sorry, thank you.
Through the chair, yes, the assets will all be publicly available and clearly publicly available for all people. So that's absolutely a given. The other part of your question in terms of the Waipa building, the Waipa building, my understanding is now tenanted and they're working towards fit outs and so forth at the moment. So.
Thank you. Sorry for speaking over you there, Councillor Tapsell. Councillor Bentley, and if you have something opposing the motion, I'll hear that. Otherwise, I am going to put the motion. So, Councillor Bentley, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question with regard to closing that track that runs down by the Green Lake. That have we not tried bilingual signage to discourage people from setting? You have tried it. And who installed the track to start with?
Council funded it as part of the Around the Forest Loop, but it was installed by the Trails Trust.
Thank you. I can't speak in favour of this proposal in that publicly we have spent far too much of ratepayer money on projects that we will never see a return on. We're not going to be able to get rent off it. And generally speaking, the people that have contacted me with regard to this subject is they have had enough of ratepayers' money going into land that they don't have any governance over.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to go through this proposal because there's so many components that have been bundled together and indicate the components that I'm supportive of, strongly supportive of, but also point out the aspects that I'm not supportive of and the basic reason why I'll be voting against it. I'll start with the ticks, the positives. First of all, Tūhourangi Ngāti Wahiao's commercialisation strategy, in broad terms, from what I understand, I'm strongly supportive of. I'm also very supportive of the protection of the tapu on Rotorua. Once upon a time at Wairiki, my PA was Merihini Hooker, and she made me acutely aware of the importance of that lake and why its tapu must be protected in perpetuity. Strong support for that. Also very strongly supportive of the achievements of the mountain biking developments, its culture that it's manufactured, its events and so on. It is a massive success story. Now, I come to the components that I'm really concerned about, and that is the Council's investment strategy over a number of years. And one concern I have is that right now, the COVID depression and the other components of our economy, as Councillor Kumar has pointed out, are languishing, and some are languishing very, very badly. And yet we've not adjusted our investment strategy. We've continued with this predisposition to pour more money after previous investments in this mountain biking sector. That rate of investment cannot be sustained in perpetuity. I would suggest that it's time also to look at some forms of austerity in the way that we actually run ourselves as a council, to start to cut back on our expenditure. But the provision of additional subsidies and permanent infrastructure on what is private land, I think is unwise. And I think it's unwise because we don't have a comparative analysis of this proposed part of our investment compared to the other parts of our economic recovery strategy. It's almost as if, as a matter of habit, we're going to continue with this approach to investment. Finally, my final point is that the people that contact me frequently and talk to their concerns in this area always emphasise, without exception, always emphasise one thing. Whatever perspectives you take on this development, one perspective I think has got to be respected, and that is that it constitutes a wealth transfer from ratepayers to a private sector partner. And that component, for many people, is concerning, and their concern is deepening. So with that, I've got to indicate I'll be voting against it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And seeing I had only one other person, Mr. Berryman Kemp, I will allow you, I'm not sure which if you're going to speak in favour or not, but as you are the final one, then I certainly would be happy to take your comments this morning.
That microphone's dead.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, really what I was just going to make a comment in support of the application. I guess from my perspective, this is an economic recovery fund, acknowledging CNI and iwi collaboration, but the key driver for me is the realisation and optimisation of mana whenua and what that actually means. I become aware of the importance for Tūhourangi Ngāti Wahiao of ensuring they optimise the commercial returns in terms of their people's economic recovery, and that's something not to be underestimated. I can't think, if you think from a marketing perspective of what's your unique selling proposition, I can't think of a place in the world where you can start your mountain bike experience with a decent coffee, have a hangi pie for lunch, end your day with a swim at Lake Tapu, and potentially have the opportunity to be guided by the people of the land, on their land, telling their stories. And that's the commercial opportunity that exists for Tūhourangi Ngāti Wahiao, which obviously builds on the whole economic recovery view. So look, thank you for the opportunity. What I wanted to do is just to outline that, because that's the main reason why I'll be supporting this.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Wang, you wanted to have a final say as the mover. I'm happy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Final
Chair.
comment.
Thank you. And, I want to say this, an investment like this, it's utilising our greatest taonga, which is our natural environment. And to the comments made about the return, or the lack of the return in an investment like this, my reply is that the numbers are there. We've clearly seen on the return that mountain biking and developments like this makes to our local economy, not only just to that, but to, like Councillor Tapsell's mentioned, our physical and mental health and our lifestyle here in Rotorua and for our people here in Rotorua. That's really all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you for those comments this morning. I am going to put recommendation 2, that the committee recommends to Council to approve funding of $500,000 from the Economic Recovery Funds allocated in the annual plan for investment into deck and hard shelter area, a new trail for round the forest loop, and trails at Te Pūtake o Tawa, the forest hub. So it has been moved and seconded, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Against? Thank you. Thank you. And to be recorded. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for that discussion. It was very good. I'm absolutely pleased that was passed, because that is a part of our recovery project, not a recovery lockdown. So, and I'm pleased that we had the thinking on the committee this morning to be able to see that motion pass. So thank you very much. I am going to take a 15-minute recess so that we can go in and have a coffee and be back for the final part. Oh, right. Thank you. Could I please have a mover that we go into the public excluded session, which we will go into as soon as we get back. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Thomas. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried.
Madam Chair,
yes.
just as we end the public session, could I just be a little cheeky, and I know we've got